All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 6 of the LiveCast Conversations with. Today we are with Brenda Hooper, and we're here to talk about conflict and conflict management and some exciting things that Brenda's got going on. Brenda, thank you so much for being part of episode 6. I know that this is this is still my learning opportunity about going through some of this stuff and dealing with it. So again, I really appreciate everyone who's been part of these early episodes. So thank you very much.
Yeah, Gene, well, thank you for having me, and I'm excited to be here. Yeah, this is great. I love talking about conflict, so here we go.
Why don't you tell us for people who don't know who you are, or maybe would like to learn a little bit more, give us your introduction about who you are, and then we'll kind of jump into what you do around conflict.
Who I am. Okay, well, I started out as a mediator, and then I also do executive coaching, and I specialize in communication and conflict management. But I mean, even long before that, I would say that this whole topic of conflict, I would say, passion around conflict started quite early in, I jokingly say that my parents were two perfect role models of what not to do in conflict. And this is nothing I say behind their back. I mean, I call my dad Old Yeller and I call my mom the Silencer. And Old Yeller has a pretty explosive temper when things aren't quite going his way. And the Silencer, well, she has that down to an art form. So she can do that for, weeks at a time. So, and I think that, what happens is that we're products of our upbringing. And so I found that I would do either or, when I was getting really frustrated, angry with somebody or something. And it ends up that that was going to cost my marriage, really, when it came down to it, where, I was kind of thrust into instant family with a 9-year-old stepson, and I didn't know how to parent, properly in terms of how to communicate. And so it was really, really challenging. And so I decided, if I want to save this marriage and relationships and make something as a healthy way of communicating, I had to change my way. So that started my journey into mediation. And I started the Justice Institute way back in, 1998 is when I started the Justice Institute. And it's kind of just been a wonderful journey from there. So I got my certification in conflict resolution from the Justice Institute. I went on and got my national designation from the ADR Institute of Canada as a chartered mediator. And then I just ended up really enjoying the coaching aspect of what I do when I go into organizations and work with their employees and whatnot, mediation. And it's just kind of all come together. And this is who I am and what I do now. So it comes from executive coaching to conflict management coaching to team coaching to, just anything to do with communication and conflict management. There I am.
Right. That's awesome. And as well, you're the owner of Discussion by Designs, a training consulting services. So that's how you then deliver all these services around coaching and mediation and training.
Yeah. Discussions by Design. I mean, I decided on that name because I realized, each of us has an opportunity to decide how we want to design our approach to everybody and anybody when we're having discussions. So you can decide whether you want to design it where it's going to be hurtful or spiteful, or you can design it where it's going to be something that's collaborative, that's educational, that, you can build the communication, you can build cohesion. We have that choice. And so that's why I named it Discussions by Design, because there's lots of different ways in which we can have discussions.
Right. And I love that. It really speaks to the intentionality of going into some discussions versus, we were talking right before how I'm a little bit on the winging it side, which doesn't necessarily work out well if you can relate to, if you feel that you've got some traits of an Old Yeller or maybe the ultimate Silencer, really that can can kind of really hamstring not just a marriage, but any relationship, really.
Well, yeah, it definitely does. There's reasons why one's a yeller and one's a silencer, right? So we have our conflict styles. And, when you learn about conflict styles, which is something that I teach, then it gives you some insight. And it's not to say that one style is right or wrong. It just helps you understand who you are and then what you need so you can tell those people, what is it that you need so you can communicate to them. But at the same token, you can kind of learn as you learn these styles, you can learn to hunch about, well, what might this person be? Who's Gene? As I'm seeing him getting a little bit frustrated here, what's he needing now? And I can kind of just, extend that olive branch a bit and be able to speak in Gene style, in a way that you and I can connect and we can communicate more effectively with each other.
Right. So it's about, you talk about, it's almost like you're hedging that bet a little bit against, how they're going to react. I know the word trigger is used a ton in the last few years, but it almost seems appropriate. You're trying to figure out what those trigger points are for that person to maybe get out of like that cerebral headspace and be feeling more from their feeling brain and just letting those all out. How do you approach it so that you can kind of give them, what I'm hearing is like you help people walk into a conversation to build like this safe space for them to go, all right, I'm not being attacked. There's actually a common ground here.
Well, yeah, it's to help people because first of all, we don't know how other people are going to react, right? Like we have no clue, like when you're in the middle of a conversation, what somebody's trigger is going to be. If we were having to guess about everybody's trigger, it'd be pretty, like we'd be on eggshells every time we're approaching people, right? So that doesn't work very well. But what we can do is choose how we respond when a person is triggered.
Right.
So, for example, old Yeller, like when he would get really excited and just be almost like he would be yelling, not almost yelling, he would yell. But I realized that his yelling really wasn't so much personal as it did to me. He wasn't yelling at me. He was yelling at his feelings and the emotions behind what that discussion was. Right. So once I learned that, then I could say to him, Dad, it'd be really helpful if, you didn't yell and then we can have a better conversation. And it was like, oh, because he didn't even realize, like we have these habits, I call them conflict habits, but we get into these habits that, all of a sudden when somebody's kind of just pointing it to you, then that can be a little bit of shock to your systems that you're realizing like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize it. So anyway, that's an example of what worked well with him. And then with the old silent or with the silencer, I just say, how can you and I communicate when you won't even talk to me? Right. And so then that had to bring her to a place of saying, okay, well, I guess I better talk if we need to resolve what, her issue is. So, I mean, those are just techniques that you can use, but those are extremes of the, yeller and the silencer. But so you walk into the situation, you're having discussion, all of a sudden, you're sensing that, okay, this conversation's derailing like this. Look, it's going to derail fast here. Right. And so you learn to ask the questions and in the language that they're speaking, so what is it that you need? It sounds like you're wanting something that's really, you need something quickly and directly. Oh, yes, and because that's a particular style. Or it sounds like the relationship is really important here. And so what can we do to help our relationship along? So it's just techniques and languaging that we use. So that's why it's communication and conflict management, because they really go hand in hand.
Okay, interesting. So what are the common styles that people should be kind of aware of when they're out, dealing with other people? Like how can they first start to go, well, maybe a better question, how can they start to look past their own blind spots, as our friend Licky would say, to understand what their style is, how they're going to need to show up in that conversation, or at least be aware of how they show up, and I'll add to the point, like the old yeller, and like, I'm not yelling at you, I'm yelling at the situation. Like that, like, I think I grew up with an old yeller as well, and like I
Uh-huh.
love my dad, and but it is definitely part of it, and I saw that in myself when I was a younger dad, and I remember like as soon as you said that, I had a flashback to being in my car. We were going somewhere, and something was happening, and I'm like, ah, and then I realized I was yelling. I'm like, I'm not yelling at you, and I'm still yelling. I'm just yelling because this is how I feel like. And you're like, oh, I need to get my shit together because like this is not helpful at all. Like, and
Yeah.
and just realizing that in myself is like, okay, when I start yelling, everyone stops listening. So, and that's not what I'm trying to accomplish, right? So being self-aware of that is pretty critical. So is it one of those situations where you have to be around somebody that you trust to be able to like take that feedback and go, hey, are you yelling at me or the situation? And once like let's like take a moment and realize what's happening right here. Or do you think that, or with your training and everything else, do you see that being something people can self-identify with?
I would say that they can self-identify, because what happens is if you were to approach somebody like that, are you yelling at me or is it the situation? Then that first of all will break their cycle, right? That's a little bit of a jarring to their system because you're recognizing that they're yelling and you're wanting to do something about it. So you're actually expressing there that you are prepared to talk about it, and let's talk about it.
Yeah.
Right. So, you can, I call that the thwarting ploy, actually. A lot of people yell when, yelling is just a thwarting ploy. So there's lots of thwarting ploys that we do. And so what you do is call that, so like you said, is like, are you yelling? Like you're yelling. So is it something that I've done or is it the situation? And so then that's going to help them to direct and even calm themselves because you just jarred their system. So that's an excellent approach actually to doing that when you're doing it in a way that is with the best intention, because we all know our intention, right? So it also depends, knowing your conflict styles will also help you understand how defensive do you get. Right. So like some people get really defensive and it's just they go on attack mode. That's, that's the reptilian brain. That's the primitive brain that's going into its protection. Right. So you're going to, freeze, fight, flight, freeze, appease is basically what it does. So as if you're feeling threatened, then it's going to, you're going to do what your conflict style is. So you either attack or you run away. So people just avoid, they'll walk away.
Right.
So, when you're sensing what the individual's like by their words and behaviors, then what you can do is I say call them on it, but call them out on a respectful way and say, we just need to, sit down and talk more about this, obviously. Now, when you know their style, so for instance, if like my mother, who is the silencer, well, she was an avoider. Right. She was an avoiding style. Well, sometimes avoiding styles, they need that time to just absorb everything that's going on. They need that time to collect their thoughts. And so they go into this avoiding direction so they can just gather what they want to say or think and do or whatever, and then they'll come back, hopefully. So what you can do with somebody like that is that you would be asking them, like, it sounds like you need some time to think about this. So let's get together at such and such a time, and have a date, let's set something in stone here where we're going to get back and talk about this. What other information do you need? What's going to be helpful for you? Those sort of things. So, I mean, that's just one style, and there's 5 styles altogether. And so it's just learning those various styles, which is what I teach in my course.
Right.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Do you want to talk a little bit about your course? It kind of just came up. So
yeah, I'm really excited about it. So it's going to be a course. It's managing conflict from the inside out, and it's all about how we have to, first of all, look at ourselves. So it's managing yourself, and then it's managing the other person, and then it's managing teams. So its focus is with work-related conflict, but it really can be applied to just about anything and everything, because what happens at work you take home, and what happens at home you take to work. So it can be for anybody, but there's going to be talks, specific, particularly with team conflict and that. So those are the three key areas that we go discuss. It's an 8-week program. And it's going to be a combination of you doing your own learning, and then also there's going to be a group component to it. So we meet once a week, and then on top of that, there's another component called talking it out. And so that's going to be some calls that people can just call in and get some laser coaching, those who are participating in the program. So that's going to be coming up in the new year, and I'm really excited about it. It's just going to be a deep dive into techniques, tools, strategies to manage conflict for yourself and for other people.
That's really exciting. That's super exciting. So you said that this is more about team-based conversations. Is the ideal then to have like full teams coming into it? Or are you hoping just, who's going to be, who will this resonate with? Like bringing in a full team, like a 5-person team having this whole thing? Or is it more like the leader of the team or the leaders of the organization kind of leading this charge?
Yeah, it's more for the leaders. It's individual, so it's going to be all participants. I do separate team training, but no, this would be open to anybody so it is for leadership. So it's for people who want to develop their leadership skills, in particular on communication and conflict management.
Right.
Yeah. So business owners, general managers, leaders in organizations. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And well, you'd mentioned that anybody can join in on this, and is beneficial for any type of, I imagine, relationship that you're going to be part of, be it work, personal, as well. If you're looking to get that edge up and figure out, why do I keep hitting my head against these walls and having these struggles within communicating with people around difficult conversations or difficult situations? Well, now there's a course for that.
Well, and it goes even beyond difficult conversations, though. It's how to have the types of conversations so it doesn't escalate to a difficult conversation. And then if it's got there, then what do you do to diffuse it? So, it is for everything. Like before, like when I started out in mediation, I did family mediation, and I did that for about 8 years. And, but I felt like I came from a corporate background, and I felt that my work was best suited for corporate as opposed to family. So I did have some great insights in dealing with family, and family stuff is tough. There's so much history and stuff that goes on in family disputes, but I did separation and divorce, and I worked with step families to keep them together. So it was really rewarding work. And so I'm, when it comes to personal relationships as well as, business relationship, work colleagues, clients, peers. Yeah, it fits everybody in that way. Yeah.
So it even if you are that business owner or that leader, what you're learning here from this course is going to be able to impact the rest of your life.
It does.
Right?
Yeah.
So I hear it's about learning how to, I guess have discussions by designs, which is baked into the name, but like learning how to like weave your way through that and hear what the other person is trying to get through before a fuse is lit, and being able to work around and coming out with solutions, right? I always look at like, I say difficult conversations, but I don't mean it from a fact of like emotionally charged. I mean it from a fact that, we actually have to get on the same page to work through this, because maybe we come from 2 different camps, and like trying to figure out how we're going to collaborate on this is going to be, that's the challenge point sometimes coming into those conversations. I see them.
Yeah. Well, you think about, we all have had difficult conversations. In fact, I could tell a story of one that I just like really blew it, really blew it way back when, long before I had my mediation. I wish I had. So it was a situation where I had gone to Hawaii with a family trip. So a bunch of us went to Hawaii, and I was managing an office. And so I don't know why, but I decided I had to call in from Hawaii into the office just to see how everything was going. So the colleague who I was talking to, she says, Brenda, I got to tell you, I just got to give you a heads up. She says, but the owner's wife has come in and completely rearranged your office, like from top to bottom. She's completely rearranged your office, the files, everything is just changed. Well, so that was the worst. That was number one. Don't ever call into the office when you're on holidays. Anyway, I had all that time to stew about it, right? And ruminate about it and just get myself really pissed off and like, oh, I was just going to kill her when I came in. So anyway, I drive into the office a Monday morning and I walk in and see all the changes to the point where she even had my family picture that was on my desk in the drawer. Like, it was just, I don't know. It was a pretty bizarre thing. So like when I tell that story, people will say, well, you deserve to be mad. I mean, that's a terrible thing that somebody did. And this is your office. Like, I ran the office and it's like, she has to come in and do this. And so anyway, I said, well, yeah, rightfully or wrongfully, the fact is that, she did it. And I didn't deal with it very well. So I had all that time to ruminate. And that's one of the things that we do, right? Like when you're having some conflict with somebody and you, like, how many times have you gone to bed and thought about it and had a sleepless night over, this discussion? Like hundreds, right?
More than I would like to admit.
Exactly. Well, so this is what I did. And so what I decided to do is I called the boss and, I just said, this is ridiculous. And, I'm fed up, whatnot, and I quit. And I mean, that's not the best thing to do when you're emotionally charged and everything else. Well, so what that did was I felt, okay, I'm in power. I'm in control here. I just quit. And, but what that did was, first of all, put them in a horrible position because they needed my licensing that I had in order to have the business even open for business. And so that put them in a horrible position. I could have handled it a heck of a lot better than I did. And it also damaged my reputation, in that industry. I mean, like, when you just see that and I quit, well, it was not good all the way around. So that's definitely an example of what not to do when you're emotionally charged, at work. Yeah, I blew it big time there. But anyway, I learned from it. I went and got some training, but I mean, that's how fiery I could be as well. Right. So, just knowing that I, could have approached that so many different ways. So it's, as designing discussions, what could I have done? How could I have set that up for a much more productive, better discussion than what had happened? Right.
That was really going to be my question to you is like, what now as future Brenda, what would you have done? Be like, if you could go back in time and be like, hey, 5 tips. This is what you need to like think about and do not do anything while you're mad. Tip number 6. That's just the given. Like,
yeah. Well, first of all, it's setting up the discussion, right? So you can, when you think that you want to have the discussion, that you're really angry, whatever the case being, first of all, you need to give yourself that breathing space. So, I could have walked in and just taken a look around, see what sort of changes that she did, why, ask questions about why she made those changes. What was it that she felt was going to improve on it, and just get some more insight into what she was doing, why she was doing it. We also deal with power imbalances there. So in that situation, she was the boss's wife, right? So I felt that I didn't have any power there because she must have gotten the okay from the boss to do this. So, like, why would he do that? And then what recourse do I have there? So you have to take a look at the situation, the people who are involved in it, for one, and decide how you're going to respond to it. And then, set it up for success. Tell the person that you do want to take some time and talk and have a conversation. And so what's a good time? Like, you don't barge into somebody's office. You don't tell your spouse that, we're going to talk now in the middle of, one of them making dinner. Those aren't good times, right? So you want to set yourself up for success. And then you talk about the specifics of it. And you don't make it personal. right? So you get the personal out, and that's really hard to do, is not because you're taking it personally. So right. When you're doing that, so you have to work at taking the personal out of it and just deal with the problem. Like, what was the problem? And so in that situation, my problem was that she has rearranged everything and it didn't even talk to me. So when it boiled down to it, is I felt unacknowledged and not included in this decision-making process, right? So there's always, when you boil it down, there's always some main triggers that happen for people that will get them into a conflict situation. So, learning about those triggers and how to set that conversation up for success. And what we could do. He didn't handle it all that well either. I mean, like, it's communication is a two-way street. So but so the Brenda who knows now, had she done that years ago, I don't know. But the other side of it is I probably wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now. So maybe that was a good thing that happened way back when.
Right. So now you can look back at it. It did set you off on a new trajectory, which if you would have came back and either just like sat with it, went, all right, she did what she did, and cool, I'm just going to stay here because they need me for my licensing. You may never have shown up into this world that you've been doing, helping people in this new way.
Right. And, if I did my the silencer approach to it and not said anything, then just continue to ruminate and resentment and perhaps do some things that wouldn't have been great for my job anyway, or, for my employer as well, so you can't, sitting doing nothing. Sometimes saying nothing is good in the moment. And so you need to pick those moments. But typically you need to address it because it's not going to go away. No. So you have to deal with the conflict in the best means that you can.
So it's not just about putting your head in the sand and going, I hope it's going to go away magically, because it's not. It's not a Wizard of Oz. We can't click our heels 3 times and magically be back in a good spot. So we actually have to say, hey, right now is not the best time to approach this. I need 2 days, but we need to work through this, because if we don't, I'd rather this be a productive relationship versus a very destructive relationship.
Yeah. And in workplace situations, I've read many stats on the cost of conflict, but to just give you one to put it in perspective. So conflict in the workplace costs over $360 billion a year to organizations. I mean, it's huge.
Is that worldwide or just North American?
That's in the US alone.
Whoa. So that's over $3 billion is gone because people aren't handling or dealing with conflict in a productive manner.
Yeah. Yeah. When workplace conflict is not being dealt with. So, owners and organizations, managers and organizations, they need to know how important it is to address it, because it's not going to go away. Right. And a lot of one of the main issues that employees have when it comes to their manager is the manager's poor communication. And so communication training and conflict management training goes hand in hand, but it costs a lot of money.
Wow. That is, like, every year, that's so much wasted opportunity out the door. Imagine even just what could be accomplished with that $300 billion could accomplish if we all just learned how to play nicely in the sandbox together and work through our stuff. Like, that number is just astronomical.
Yeah. $360 billion a year is what they've been able to calculate the cost of conflict. It will be approximately, if you take one employee and, like minimum, like $30,000 a year, which is quite low, in terms of employee. But if you take a $30,000 a year employee and the cost to replace that employee, it would be about $70,000.
You say 70 or 70?
Yeah, $70,000 just to replace that employee.
So double plus a little bit.
Yeah. So it's big money, and people need to realize that. The thing is that organizations often don't, put these into some priority in terms of, what's going on with conflict, how's it being managed. I mean, they have, HR, some have HR, the larger ones, but a lot of them don't. And they are, they're trying to push it off to the side as opposed to, deal with it effectively. What can they learn from that employee? What's going on with that employee? Whether it's poor morale, whether it's absenteeism, whether it's presenteeism, whether there's silos being worked on within the organization that's creating cracks in the organization's integrity.
Right.
All these are things that organizations, companies, owners need to look at much deeper. Yeah.
It's a huge problem, and it all just comes down to the big part about it is that communication style.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I do cases. I do cases in employee prohibitive action complaints. So whether, a lot of times what ends up, I find, is most of the time it's got to do with interpersonal relationships and communication. And, if people had the training and had taken the time just to, take a step backwards and start thinking differently about conflict, then they can certainly address it in a different way as well. So, and the cost to the stress, to both the worker and to the employer, the cost of legal fees, the time away, all that stuff adds up. That's in that $360 billion cost.
Yeah. That's a huge opportunity cost just being thrown out the window.
Yeah. Yeah.
Imagine how many people could take your course for $360 billion.
Well, I mean, I'm setting out to, I want to change the world. I really do. I mean, that's my inspiration. That's why I aspire to, is to be able to, work with organizations, that everybody within the organizations, not just management, but anyone in organizations, has an opportunity to learn how to develop the communication and conflict management skills, because it will just make, our lives so much richer and better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
yeah.
100%. And and it's compared to the cost of the course, and just even when you're looking at because I added one of the comments here is that it costs $70,000 just to replace a $30,000 employee. Like, I would spend, if I knew that cost going in, I'd be more than happy to spend, even $7,000 on that employee to get them trained up to be able to understand their own roadblocks, to be able to come into this organization, have the proper types of conversations, and be able to be part of conflict resolution, mindset within it.
Yeah.
Because it'd be worth it.
Well, and it's creating a culture, right? When you create a culture that explores conflict, and conflict isn't bad. No. I mean, there's so much positive that can happen from conflict. You learn about yourself. You learn about flexibility. You develop your active listening skills. You figure out, what's really important to you and what's really important to the other person. You can get really creative. Like organizations can become very creative when they allow conflict to happen in a productive way. Right. So that's the key, is it's productive conflict instead of unproductive conflict. I mean, like when you think about conflict, like what does that stir up in you? If I ask about conflict, what does conflict mean to you, Gene?
Oh, that's a great question. For me, like I used to run a lot of teams in the tech world. So I'd always have my one of my intro spiels is that we always have conversations and we're open to conflict. What that always would mean is that we may have differing ideas on how we're going to get to it, we can be passionate about the problem, but we'll never take it out on each other. We will not, disparage anybody that's sitting around this table. And for me, I was always like pro high fives and hugs. So like no matter what happened, we'd always leave that table with a high five at the end, right? And that's for me, it's conflict is super healthy. I find that if everyone just all agreed on the same thing all the time, we would never be anywhere. We would never have some of the most amazing like inventions or innovative and creative ideas. It's where, you know, competing ideas can like rub against each other in a very healthy way. And like all of a sudden it births this incredible like new idea that takes the best parts of it. And it's not from an area of compromise, but it's an area from like collaboration and being able to take that and build and go, you're an incredible person. I hope you think I'm an incredible person. I'm going to trust you. I might not like where you're originally starting. You might not where I'm starting from. But I know if we put this problem in front of us instead of between us, we're going to come up with some crazy stuff.
It is. Yeah. I mean, yeah, you can get very creative if you allow conflict to, I mean, managing it that way, you know, in the brainstorming. And I liked what I heard, you know, when you said like it's addressing the problem, it's not the person, right? Like you take the person out of it and let's just deal with the problem. So, I mean, it's good. So like when you think about conflict, you know, without naming names, like when, you know, when have you experienced like a horrible, like a conflict that's just gone wrong, like just bad, derailed, right?
Just one?
Well, you know, because like just give me a little insight on that. But then, and then, you know, what I really want to ask though is, how did that impact you?
So how to say things without giving away where things came from is the tough part, but trying to generalize it as well. Sorry if you guys working from home during COVID with kids, if you guys can hear upstairs, I'm sorry. So the conflicts always came down from, if I look back at it, it drew its roots from egos, and it drew its roots from usually a power imbalance or somebody having the need to feel that they have to like one up people by stepping on them. Mm-hmm. And for me, I was even back when I was young, this may shock some people. I used to be in band. I used to be like the atypical nerd. Like if you look at like my high school yearbook, the laughing thing was like the movie with McLovin came out while I was in high school, and all my friends were like, "Oh my God, you're McLovin." I'm like, ha ha ha. But I would always fight back against bullies. And so one of the biggest conflicts I have is I still do that today. I've learned to do it a lot better and more effectively. But when I see that happening, I see people that aren't maybe feeling like they're in a position to stand up for themselves, or maybe they're afraid of their job. I have stood up in those situations, and that's happened with numerous clients and in numerous gigs that I've had across my career. And typically bullies don't really like that off the start. And so there's always that conflict of like, okay, who's gonna win? And somebody in those roles usually has like this idea that they have more power because, well, they can fire you, or they can, you know, just walk away from it and be done. I've dealt with a lot of old yellers in business, and it's to me, it always comes down to stepping on the people while trying to solve a problem, which usually benefits the people that are stepping on them, right? And that just like that grinds my gears more than anything else, because now you've just made it so these people feel so little, so you can feel so big, and now they're not going to work for you. Now they're going to add to that $360 billion because they're going to be disengaged. Wow. And you better kind of be lucky that they're maybe a little bit more passive, because they're not going after you through like human rights tribunals and stuff like that. It's that's for me where I've seen the conflict and being able to generalize it. Like, and so what that's brought out for me is continuing to be like trying to help people get past that and put that problem in front of them, right? And sometimes maybe you don't need to, but maybe this is my own ego. Like when somebody's really up there and not looking to be thwarted, sometimes a bully needs to be punched in the nose. And sometimes it just gets attention, or finding that way to break that cycle and get it back to what the root cause of that problem is has been I guess, part of what I'm still continuing to learn. And
Learn.
that's why I'm doing coaching it myself, is like trying to help people get past their own obstacles. Like, what is the real struggle? Like, what are the repeated stories that come up? And I guarantee, if now hearing the term old yeller and the silencer, like keeping those in the back of my mind, like coming up about like, well, when was last time? Which one of these pictures do you associate with when you feel like you're trying to deal with a conflict, right? And understanding what that could mean and how that's going to show up in their relationships and in their career, in their reputation. It's like, is that what you really want? And where did this story come from? Right? It's incredible how much of how we show up as adults was actually like encoded us when we were like just kids. And you don't even know it because we buried it. And our subconscious is great at protecting us from that type of stuff.
Yeah.
But really trying to turn the lights on that is, I just want, before I got into this coaching thing, I was doing fractional CTO work and COO work. One of my things that I guess I still strive to do is like, I want to help make businesses like places employees love to work at. And it sounds like we're on a very similar mission around that, right? Like it just comes down to just treating people like adults, treating them decent, and going like, just because, John Smith today came in and he was in a crappy attitude, be like, instead of going like, what's going on? Your numbers are down. Be like, hey man, how's everything at home? What's going on in your world? It's like, 9.99999% out of 10. It never has to do with an external factor. Like if I see, Brenda being angry and be like, oh, did I do something? Be like, maybe I did, maybe I didn't. But chances are it's more about the story that's being told and going and trying to find that out and going, what's up?
Well, and you're trying to, like, you're there to help people understand where their happiness is, and it's within them, right? Like we know it's all within us. And so like when we change ourselves inside, then our outside world changes, right? Yeah. So it's, when you take a look at conflict, I mean, like in terms of my studying of conflict, I mean, you were describing here like the bully. And so you really come in as kind of the hero figure, like you're going to stand up to that bully, right? You're going to do what you need to do to make yourself or the other person, help the other person feel heard and understood. And I do want to put the caution there. There are some horrible bullies out there, and there's, HR management, like HR and, ways to handle it, and not necessarily best for individuals to handle it on themselves, on their own. But we're just talking about normal conflict, not that, horrible, spiteful type of conflict, but just like a normal conflict. But what happens in conflict is that it depends on how passionate we are, like what our goal is in that discussion, like what's our objective, our goal. And then you measure that compared to, on an axis, and then compared to what's the relationship? How important is that relationship to us? So when you think of the goal, whether it's high or low, and the relationship, whether it's strong, whether it's important or not important. So and that will help us determine, because often, like when I'm teaching, how do you respond in conflict? And the response I get is, well, it depends with who. Right. So, and it's true. It does depend with who, because of this axis of the importance of it. So for instance, if I'm going to, if I go to a supermarket, one I've never been to before, I'll probably never be there again. And the cashier is rude to me, or slow or something, and I'm ticked off, I might respond in a certain way, as opposed to me going to my local market where I know everybody. Right. And then also, so how important is that relationship? And so when you look at that axis, that's where we can start to see what are the ways in which we can manage the conversation, and why is that person responding this way? Well, maybe because that relationship isn't important to them, but their goal, their objective is really important to them. Right. So, how they say, choose your fight. Well, that's, how high or how low that goal is will help determine which fight you're going to choose as well.
Right.
Yeah. So it's just looking at all those different dynamics and what you're going to do with it. But I mean, when you think about conflict, Like, when have you had a conflict that actually turned out really good? Can you think of something like that?
Oh, yeah. Well, I'll take it back down to just coming up with ideas around like products and stuff with team members from back in the day. Is we would come into it with varying degrees of how we might want to accomplish it, and it can get very loud. Actually, a very good friend of mine who I grew up with, Ryan, we did most of our career together, and we'd been told that we acted like an old married couple, like that, like the we know each other very well. And so like that conflict itself is like, from the outside, people will be like, wow, they're being really mean to each other. But for us, we're like actually in our zone, like figuring it out, because we have that trust, being able to be like, we're brothers. So like we're able to like pick our problems apart and do it very like as efficiently as possible, which is like attacking the problem and without attacking each other. But it's like it can get very loud, but we would come up with some incredible stuff very quickly. Like it was just like a flow state that would happen for us. So like that type of thing is like when I think about it is that it's that very passionate conversation and that conflict, and just going, yeah, like we did this afterwards, and being really stoked that the idea worked.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, that's what I want to encourage people to think about conflict, is it really is an opportunity to really understand what this other person's all about, really understand what their passion and, what's their experience, how are they bringing their information that's going to help you help the situation. And, so think of it and stay curious. And I think if anything, that's, one of the big pieces in managing conflict is to stay curious about what's happening for that other person.
I love that you said that. Like that's the key to life, period, I think, or to a happy life, is staying curious. It keeps us out of that judgmental mind frame, or keeps us out of that judgmental mind frame, I should say.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it's it's an interesting topic. Like, communication, conflict management is so broad. It really is broad. There's so much great information out there, in theory, in just practice and leadership. And it's necessary. And unfortunately, I think what's happening, especially now, like with our COVID situation, is people are relying on the technology. Relying on texts and emails so much that they're losing the art of conversation. They're losing that ability. And the thing is that we actually need those connections. We need to feel those connections, because when it comes to communication and conflict, I mean, it's a physical part of who we are and how we operate. Mm-hmm. So, like, for instance, our brains, there's our brain, which is also connected to our heart, which is connected to our gut. And, you have that gut feeling. But the heart, neuroscientists, they've discovered now that there's nerves and synapses and everything else that goes in terms of our human body, that connects our heart to our brain. And so that tells us, like, within 10 seconds, as soon as entering a room, your body is telling you whether you are going to move towards another person or whether you're going to move away from them. And it's based on what your heart is actually doing, is telling our brain. And so, when you think about the extraordinary, bodies that we have that communicate so well, if we learn to listen to it and, hear what it has to say, but we lose that connection when in this viral world that we're living in right now. So I just can't wait until we can get back to connecting, face to face, over a cup of coffee, in a safe way. So, and in rooms, because that's really powerful and dynamic.
Oh, big time.
Yeah.
I just noticed that we're at 5:04, so I want to be respectful of our time. This conversation has been great, so thank you so much. I want to give you one more opportunity to give a shout out to your course that's coming up and the dates. And I'm going to bring it back up on the screen here as well.
Yeah. So it's called Managing Conflict from the Inside Out. And so I'm doing this, it's a beta course actually, so which is a great opportunity for people to come in and take part in actually co-creating this course with me. So what that means is that you're going to have some awesome material. You're going to make some great connections. It's on January 27th. It's for 8 weeks. Okay, so those are Wednesdays. So it's 8 Wednesdays. And then it also has the other component, which is some laser coaching to it on Thursdays. So it's going to be fun. I'm really excited about it. It's going to be talking about managing yourself, managing the other person, and managing teams in conflict.
Awesome. Well, I wish you a ton of success on that. Everyone, those links are going to be down below in the comments if you aren't fast enough to type it from what's on the screen. So they should already be up there on both Facebook and YouTube. Please go check this out. We want to help Brenda make a dent in that $360 billion every year. Let's see if we can take it down to 359 together. That'd be a great start.
Great start. Great. Well, it's been wonderful. Thank you, Jean, for having me.
Well, thank you very much for being on this and being part of episode 6. This was a great conversation around conflict. Definitely learned a few things and looking forward to going back and taking more notes from this. So again, Brenda, you were incredible. Thank you. And everybody else, thanks for watching the live cast From Peeled Back. My name is Gene, and we're done for the day. Thank you.
Bye now.
Bye.